So again, I just put the resources in the chat. If you'd like to chant with us, you can open up that document. You'll see there the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. And we've been doing this chant, especially at this time when we've been looking at wise effort in terms of the Buddhist teachings. And just curious about, like, where does inspiration come from for us? How do we uncover some energy to make effort, which has, this is what we've been learning in those places in life where we're able to make effort, we find energy. So it's this maybe paradox that we need this commitment, this engagement, this showing up, and we get energized. And even in a simple way, just like coming here this morning and the willingness to do the chant together, even if it seems a little strange for you or it's unfamiliar, but just to show up, not to believe or not to have our life, our mind governed by fear. Fear is some information, when something seems new or we're not certain. It's good to have some charge, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't engage. We should move forward. It just means I'll pay attention. I'll see if this is helpful or not, or if this is setting in motion harm or not. Because if we misuse that signal, like when we have naturally concern or fear arising, we live in a very narrow, tight place. We hide in a little corner because everything, and of course, the more we do that, the more everything does feel new and strange and perhaps dangerous. So we get more and more into the corner of our lives. And that's a pretty restricted and unpleasant place to live. So with that in mind, I'll share it one more time, just because more people are joining in, and you can open up that document and find that chant, and let's do it together. I'll ring the bell 3 times to begin. The Buddha's 5 subjects for frequent recollection. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. For those who are new, the word kama or karma means intentional actions, actions done with intention. So we take our time, we cultivate a stable sitting posture for the meditation time. Learning that it's possible, it's part of the wise effort, this commitment to relative stillness, this commitment to being at ease and relaxed in the sitting posture, which means reminding the body as often as helpful, relax, that it's okay to be soft and at ease. And this subtle, not force, the subtle uprightness in the posture, without sacrificing that sense of stillness and softness and ease in the body, just a sense of alignment in the spine that is reflecting our interest in being awake, being right up in the middle, sensitive. And right from the beginning of our practice, like a newborn, somebody being born again into the present moment, we can recognize in a fresh way what we so often miss in life. And it never sounds quite right to say it, but this is how it is. This moment, the present moment, is being known. And it isn't about the particulars, what the eyes are seeing, what the ears are hearing, what the skin is feeling as in physical sensation, or what the mind is thinking. It's really more that these experiences of the body and mind are being known. There's this unstoppable flow of sense experience, sense impingement on the sensitivity of the heart. And it's being known. It's being felt here, now. It's like this. So it's really useful to have some humility as we remember, rediscover what it is to be present. At times, the mind wrongly thinks it's so simple that no effort is needed. And just as often, the mind wrongly presumes that it takes a lot of muscular effort to be present and over efforts, and therefore gets tight in the body and the mind. So at the beginning of a sit, every sit, so when you're practicing alone at home, really take the needed time to remember what it is to be present. And remembering what kind of wholesome effort is useful. What kind of effort is too much? What kind of effort is too little? How to remember to recognize the present moment. What kind of effort is helpful in sustaining this present moment awareness? And of course, some of you will be working with a more open awareness style of practice. Others of you find it more useful to have a particular meditation object like awareness of the breath coming in, awareness of the breath going out. But whether you're using an open awareness or a more specific meditation object, it's all about these two related efforts. The effort to remember to recognize the present moment, this is being known, and the particular effort to sustain present moment awareness, to not forget. It's the effort of not forgetting. So in that sense, it has a lot to do with interest, a wholesome interest. It's so easy to over and under effort, or to make efforts in an unwise, unhelpful way that lead to distraction, caught up in some reaction, some self-centered drama like doubt, thinking don't know what we're doing. But starting again, that launching effort to reignite our practice, it's really this subtle effort to recall this experience is being known here and now. It's like this now. And to feel the body sitting, or to feel the breath coming in or going out, or to notice that the thinking mind is tied up in knots and the tension is in the body, and it's like this. So the beginning again means awareness without any judgment, and in a sense without trying to fix, because recognizing the way that it is enough. That honest, open, sensitive acknowledgement that the moment is like this. This is what the mind is doing. This is how it feels here in the heart and body. Can this be okay? That this moment of reality is being known. It's like this. And then into the effort to sustain, to not forget, to be interested. And finally, I mentioned last week that sustaining present moment awareness involves both recognizing the inner pleasure that arises when we have some momentum, some continuity of present moment awareness. In a simple but real way, it feels good. This wholesome inner pleasure as the mind gathers, unifies, settles, feels whole. Notice that pleasure, because it's really helpful to be aware, mindfully aware, that it feels good, this continuity of mindfulness. And then in a somewhat opposite sense, as we become more distracted, the awareness more superficial and reactive, there should be a natural fear or concern. In a sense, we start to sense the stress of the mind getting caught in dramas, reactions, superficial, flitting about, seeking something interesting to absorb into, the next drama, the next planning, the next futuring. Kind of hunger in the mind, looking for something exciting or dramatic. So we should have a natural concern. Oh, honey, this isn't the way. Been here, done this before. Doesn't really lead anywhere. So appreciate that concern, or you could even call it a wholesome fear. When the mind begins to go down a pathway that it's been down before, that just leads to the mind getting tied up into knots, and then the body beginning to hold this tension of this mental activity in a way that's not helpful. So that wholesome concern is something like realizing you're holding a hot pan, and then the wholesome instinct arrives to just let go, to drop that mental activity, because it's not productive of anything helpful. It's these two forces awareness of the inner pleasure of the continuity of present moment awareness, and awareness of the stress and the natural concern or wholesome fear that arises when the mind is getting involved in self-centered dramas of one kind or another. And just that simple recognition that this doesn't go anywhere helpful, leading to the mind abandoning that activity. And then we start again. We recognize, oh, this is being known. And that recognition often requires that we feel what it feels like to have been lost in thought. So we have to feel the reverberations of maybe the mind being caught up in a drama. The physical tension doesn't disappear immediately. It may linger and slowly fade. So there's this place of beautiful patience as the tension that we stirred up gradually fades away. And that inner pleasure of the continuity of awareness begins to return. So let's continue now in silence. And remember, as we continue our practice this morning, we're aspiring to learn something about the effort to begin again, to recognize the present moment, and the effort to sustain present moment awareness. So regardless with how you're meditating, get interested in these two related efforts, starting again, recognizing this is being known, and the effort to sustain present moment awareness. And for these last few minutes of our practice, be curious about how practice can become in moments effortless. It has, in a sense, its own momentum. So in a way, there can be this sense of abiding in the present moment. And the mindful awareness just keeps setting itself in motion moment by moment. So we'd say at this time, the practice or the effort is to trust the momentum. And taking some time to open the eyes, but we'll continue to hold the body still and relaxed. Just aware of seeing and hearing, aware of thinking and all of the cognitive activity of the mind. And again, just curious about wise effort to be present, to remain, to continue this present moment awareness. And even as we begin to stretch and adjust the body, maybe put your hands together if that's what you do at the end. But the continuity of awareness can continue even as we begin to leave the formality of our sitting time. Remembering that we're here together in community and just being aware of that feeling, whatever that feeling is for each of us. Looking at the computer screen, maybe you hate Zoom and then you'll notice that, or maybe feeling part of the community trumps the aversion to Zoom and then you'll notice that. But I'm happy to be here with everyone, and thank you so much for coming. And in particular, anybody who's new to this Zoom live stream. And we have people in the building now on Sunday morning. So those of you who live close, if you want to sit with other people and have your small group discussions live with other folks, feel free to come by the center. We have some wonderful volunteers like Lisa this morning who hosts that in-person Sunday morning. Of course, I'm here in the office and the folks are wearing masks in the Dharma hall right now because here in Minneapolis, we have a pretty high transmission of the Delta variant of the COVID. So we're wearing masks indoors. And today we're finishing up our third week of the study of the Paramis, these beautiful qualities of the heart, specifically wise effort, as I think the fifth of the 10 Paramis. And then starting next Sunday, I won't be here. Gabe Keller-Flores will be teaching for me. Shelley Graff and I will be leading our annual Labor Day weekend retreat. Some people will be on Zoom and some people will be at Common Grounds Retreat Center near Prairie Farm, Wisconsin. But Gabe will begin talking about truthfulness, the next of the Paramis. So what in particular today, I want to talk about this movement into effortlessness, which is sort of what we all like, right? We want to inhabit the kind of efforting in life that is effortless, that seems so natural. And we have these very poetic and beautiful images generally in the Buddhist tradition. You know, I've heard some of my teachers talk about a leaf falling off a tree in the fall, excuse me, and how natural and effortless it is for that leaf to find its way from the tree to the ground. A more common simile that was used all the way back by the Buddha 2,500 years ago or so is rain falling on the side of a mountain. And that rain hits the ground, that water finds its way down the mountainside in streams and lakes, and eventually back into the ocean. That cycle, that water cycle and evaporation, and all of that whole engine of evaporation and clouds and rain and flowing down and back into bodies of water where the water evaporates. Now that's a lot of work, right? When you think about how much rain, like here in the Twin Cities, has fallen in the last week or two after a long drought, you know, several inches. Well, that's a lot of water that got evaporated, that got moved, that fell, that flowed, and on and on. And we can really sense when we have these natural images, or how fall becomes winter and winter becomes spring, spring, summer, summer, fall. There's a lot that happens to the plants and environment as these seasons change. And we can sense with these images, at least, or these ideas, we can sense the effortlessness of this natural activity. But we could imagine too, you know, if we sort of personalize the seasonal change, like there's some god of the seasons and how much work she or he has to do to make that seasonal change happen. But that would be a story, as if there's some kind of individual who does that work. You know, there's the rain god or there's the water god that has to kind of do the work of the water cycle. And it just, you know, as a human being, we have to, and I've been talking about this the last couple of weeks for those who are new, we need to find this nimble place where we're not afraid of efforting in just the right kind of way, the way the moment asks for. And when the moment asks for what feels to us like a very individual, personal, courageous, fearless efforting, then we have to be willing to show up in that way, because that's what to us feels skillful, helpful in this moment. You know, that what we might imagine as that more heroic kind of efforting, where we lean in, where we're fearless, doing the right thing, doing what needs to be done. But that kind of heroic effort, individualistic effort, that's appropriate in some moments, and it's not appropriate in other moments. And a lot of times we find ourselves in practice using the same instrument, the same strategy, but at the wrong time. And we're in a moment where the kind of effort is much more about trusting the wholesome forces that are already in motion in our heart, the wisdom that's already in motion. And so it's more about abiding with the natural wholesome qualities that are already present in our mind, trusting, relaxing, letting the wholesome qualities of mind do what they do already. And I gave us a little bit of that instruction at the end of the sit this morning. But I really encourage you, and we can use this as a theme for our small group discussions for those who stay at the end, to talk about those times in our lives where we were navigating some difficulty or some part of our life, our responsibilities, whatever. But we just found that there was just a lot of trust, a lot of nimbleness, a lot of this, less of this sense of, I've got to do this. I've got to decide what I'm going to do here. I've got to say something to this person or make this effort to get this done. And more the sense of everything happening on its own, including the choice making, including the speaking, including the doing. So even those seemingly very personal responsibilities or efforts that I'm making, even that can seem as if it's happening on its own. A lot like it is when we're authentically playing. Remember way back when you were a kid, or maybe hopefully more recently, even as adults, but we're really playing. It's not like, oh, I'm playing, but really I'm exercising. When we're really playing, the idea, the projection of me working, me doing, it's not there. Like, maybe some of you like to dance. If the conception in my mind when I'm dancing, supposedly having fun and dancing, is, oh God, I got to move my body. I got to do this and I got to do that. And then I'm going to do this. It wouldn't be fun for one. It probably wouldn't look very good either, right? Because it would look like there's a person struggling to fit in or struggling to do the right thing or struggling to have fun even. But the struggle obviously gets in the way. The idea, the conception that there's somebody struggling to make this effort, and just the things that are going to come our way this afternoon, whether it's washing dishes or you're going to do some yard work, or you got to make a difficult phone call or have a conversation with someone in the family or whatever that initially appears in our heart as work, that I individually have to, like there's a burdensomeness, a weightfulness of that thing I have to do, have to think through, have to say, have to do. And then just to reimagine it as water flowing down the side of the mountain. And it doesn't mean that my personality and the way my mind's conditioned doesn't mean I'm going to navigate this responsibility perfectly. I'm going to say just the right thing to this person, or, wash the dishes in just the right way. It just means that perhaps we can learn to emphasize the effort of awareness, this is being known, and less of the identification with the doing. And the thing is, the awareness of the doing beautifully informs the doing. This is the real insight of the Buddha. It's not that this personality, this way of relating, this way of doing stuff in the world is perfectly skillful and doesn't need transformation. No, it needs transformation. The weeds need to be weeded out. The wholesome qualities of mind need to be developed and cultivated, maintained. But the way that we, I mentioned, I think last week, the 4 exertions, the way that we prevent and abandon unwholesome qualities in our heart and to develop and maintain the wholesome qualities in our heart turns out to be being aware. So being aware includes wisdom comprehending that these are unskillful and these are skillful, knowing the difference between what are wholesome qualities of mind in the direction of release and what are unwholesome qualities of mind in the direction of stress. So that open, clearly comprehending awareness, non-judging, but clearly comprehending, actually is what helps the preventing and abandoning and the developing and the maintaining of wholesome. Not some, complaining, burdened sense of self that feels like I have to prevent my mind from getting caught up in my defensiveness and my negativity and my irritability. I'm the one who now has to abandon this oh poor me tendency that my mind, my personality has. I'm the one who has to learn how to be fearless. I'm the one who needs to maintain that fearlessness and that ease and that kindness. It just feels totally overwhelming. So sometimes we really are in that place of seeing these four exertions to prevent and abandon the unwholesome, to develop and maintain the wholesome. Sometimes it really is appropriate to see that as a personal effort, but we don't stay there. The whole idea is to aspire and to intuitively sense the possibility of moving into this effortless realm. And that effortless realm really, like I mentioned last week, there's the carrot and the stick. So when it's appropriate to make that sort of personal or even egoic effort to prevent and abandon the unwholesome from getting, more strength, more reinforcement, and to develop and maintain the wholesome. A lot of what we use is the fear, like, if I don't make effort here, I'm just going to do what I've done before, and I'm going to dig the hole deeper. I'm going to reinforce the unwholesome qualities in my mind, my personality. So we use the stick. We appropriately comprehend karma, cause and effect. Oh, I'm being really lustful here. I'm being really greedy here. I'm being really attached here. I'm being really afraid and tight here, controlling, negative. Oh, these qualities should be prevented and abandoned. The opposite should be developed and maintained. I care. I don't want to sort of go down this pathway. So I'm willing to make that seemingly personal effort to abandon and prevent, to develop and maintain. So that's the stick. That's the sort of sensing, like we did when we did the 5 remembrances. Oh yeah, this is the way that it is. And it heightens that spiritual urgency. I don't want to reinforce these patterns. I want to cultivate these other tendencies. But then when we get some momentum, it starts to feel good. And if we keep in mind how the wholesome qualities, when they have momentum, like the continuity of mindfulness and appropriate faith and all the wholesome qualities, joyful interest and tranquility, calm, equanimity, non-attachment, when these wholesome qualities get some momentum and we feel the rightness, the wholesomeness, the inner pleasure, then that is enough, like to comprehend, I trust what's in motion. I feel the rightness, the wholesomeness, the inner pleasure of what's in motion. That attention to the inner pleasure of the mind becoming more stable, more clear, less judging, more discerning what's wholesome and unwholesome, more naturally abandoning what's unwholesome and cultivating what's wholesome, naturally, as water flows down the side of a mountainside. Then you see, then some neurotic sense that I have to do all that work would be not helpful in those moments. We have to change how we effort to more like trusting what's in motion, trusting the wholesome qualities of the heart and mind that are already manifesting, have some momentum. And all the practice needs is that discerning present moment awareness that is discerning and comprehending. This feels right. This feels wholesome. The heart feels stable. The heart is already discerning what's wholesome and unwholesome. It's already abandoning and preventing the unwholesome and cultivating and maintaining the wholesome. It's already It's all happening on its own. But it takes an increase of faith at this moment. It's like this is a new skill at some point in your practice where you start to access some moments where your mindfulness has some momentum. The wisdom awareness practice you've been cultivating for years, months, decades even, then you start to have moments where the practice has momentum. And then you'll have to transform how you make effort from that more personal effort, relying on the stick and the carrot, right? Like appropriate fear for doing what I always do, basically acting out with greed, hatred, and delusion, egoic ways. Like, oh yeah, don't want to do that. Feeling that sort of personal attraction to learning how to be more skillful, right? Because that's the carrot. Oh, that feels good. But to abandon that orientation when there's some momentum. And so I thought, like with the small groups today, and then some of you won't stay for the small groups, but then on your own to reflect, or with a Dharma friend sometime this week or the next couple of weeks, to have a conversation with a good friend who's also into the practice. What is actually your experience in your life where there were moments where being a good, skillful, aware, kind human being felt effortless? Didn't feel like there was somebody trying to be skillful. It just felt like everything was happening on its own. And whatever you were navigating, like an interaction with someone or walking down the street or whatever you were doing, it doesn't matter. That activity felt like nature. People always ask, like, how does that deeper insight into anatta, the impersonal, empty of self-centered drama experience, how does that arise? What does that look like when it arises? Well, it's very much related to these moments where we feel in the flow, in the groove, everything happening on its own. And like I mentioned earlier in the talk, it might be initially moments when we're playing. We're just doing something we love to do, and wholesome qualities naturally arise. Unwholesome qualities of the heart and mind naturally are suppressed. And we might just notice that wholesome, light, effortless, everything happening on its own kind of feeling. Now, the key is to be aware of that feeling itself instead of being aware of the idea, oh, I really like cooking. I really like chopping vegetables. That's why I'm so happy. Or I really like walking in the woods in this particular place because the trees are like this and the creek is like that. So the mind constructs a story about why I'm feeling good, and it loses its connection with the present moment. So the key in those more natural moments, natural times when we feel that joy, that joyful interest, that lightness of heart, that absence of dukkha, absence of tightness, that grip in the heart doesn't seem to be there. As we discern, as that becomes in a way our meditation object. So wisdom and awareness is keeping that in mind. Of course, why not? It's there, here and now in the present moment. This is being known, this is being felt. That's the key. We have to make that inner good feeling the object of awareness. The rightness of the way the mind is relating to the present moment, the easefulness of that way of relating, the absence of friction, the absence of self-centered drama, attachment, that inner grip of grasping, of self-centered grasping, is relatively gone, relatively at ease. And so we keep that in mind and we learn to trust it, because that will really expand the understanding, deepen the understanding of what it is to experience the heart, the mind empty of self-centered grasping, empty of this self-centeredness. It's an insight. It isn't some philosophical thing we're trying to figure out. It's an experience we awaken to. when everything is happening on its own. And it's really the development of wise effort, and how effort has to be nimble. We have to be willing to make effort in a way that actually helps. And we don't actually know that until we're in the moment. We show up, and we show up because we care, and we see like what is in the direction of what is trustworthy. Is the way the heart, the mind, body is showing up, the way the mind, heart, body is engaging? Is it leading? Is it planting seeds for stress and tension? Is the grip getting tighter? Or is the way the mind relating, the body relating, the way we're showing up in the direction of release? This is the essential insight. That's why we say wise effort, because it's always governed. Efforting is always governed by this fresh, in the moment discernment of whether the way we're relating is leading to more of a grip or more of a release, a flow. That's the only thing we can trust. This is the thing about wisdom. It isn't, I think I mentioned this last week, we can't hold on to it. It has to be renewed. It's an ongoing discernment. Like what's helpful right now. This is, I forget if I read this last week. And it really speaks to this point, like, although we can feel so attracted to living in a more effortless way, as we should aspire to that. Whatever intuition, whatever experiences we've had will naturally cause us to aspire to live in a more effortless, nimble, creative, easeful, skillful way. But the path to that effortlessness is first, we get grounded in this sort of self-centered place where I'm noticing how I can make things worse based on how I relate, and how I can make things better. And I, in a sense, learn how to own my personal karmic responsibility. I am the heir to my intentional actions, like we chanted at the beginning, born of them, abide with them. As the Buddha says, karma is our only true possession. Because karma, like when I act with intention, that impression, the quality of the intention I acted with, let's say it was really self-centered, a lot of greed or a lot of hate, that gets laid down. So the mind stream is affected by the quality of my intention. If my intentions are kindly and wise, there's like no trace. So the karma is, empty of being a weight, a burden. And so when we talk about discerning what's skillful and unskillful, we're really talking about discerning the karmic residue, the karmic, what's left over, the trace from the quality of our motivation or intentions. We're discerning. So we're making the effort to keep the present moment in mind in order to discern and to find our way. Because that's the only way. It's like we have to give wisdom the opportunity to discern, are we planting seeds for stress or seeds for release? We have to get in the game. And getting the game means the mind is, wisdom and awareness is able to comprehend the present moment, recognize the present moment, oh, it's like this now, so that it can comprehend or discern how the mind is relating, skillfully or unskillfully. Qualities that need to be abandoned and prevented, qualities of mind that need to be developed and maintained. And eventually that discernment becomes the new habit. So then we don't need that seemingly personal me, Mark, the practitioner, to do the discerning. It's just the nature of the mind's habits to discern and to let go of what should be let go of, to cultivate what should be cultivated. It just becomes the natural process of the mind to relate skillfully, to abandon what's unwholesome, to cultivate what what's wholesome. This is from Ajahn Thanisaro. Thus, through observation, one will realize that skillful effort has no room for doctrinaire approaches. The polar extremes of constant exertion to the point of exhaustion and its opposite, a knee-jerk fear of efforting, are both misguided here, as is the seemingly middle way of moderation in all things. The true middle way means tuning one's efforts to the abilities and the task at hand. In some cases, this entails an all-out effort. In others, simple watchfulness. The ability to sense what kind and what level of effort is appropriate in any given situation is an important element in developing the basic requirements for skill, mindfulness, and discernment by putting them into use. I want to read a little bit more from this article by Ajahn Thanisaro. He's a Western Buddhist monk in the Thai forest tradition. And this is from a very wonderful book, a little bit technical for some of you maybe, but he wrote it a while back, The Wings to Awakening. You can get this online. Thanisaro, Thanissaro. And in this, he talks about effortlessness and the wisdom that is required. In the third stage of practice, the function of exertion becomes finer yet, as it maintains a basic empty or radically phenomenological awareness of the frames of reference, the four foundations of body and mind, in order to bring to mind the state of non-fashioning appropriate for this process of awakening, right? So we go from being a practitioner and doing the practice, but ultimately we have to have periods of times where we're practicing not to become, not to do, but just to understand, just to be aware. The equipoise of this state, he writes, beyond the categories of effort or non-effort, explains the paradox expressed in this discourse from the Buddha, which states that the mind crosses the floods of endless suffering by neither pushing forward nor staying in place. An equipoise that embodies the ultimate skillfulness of right effort or wise effort in bringing the mind to the point beyond skill. Some of you remember that discourse. I use it a lot, and it's quite well known, where the Buddha is being asked about how he crossed the floods of suffering. And he said, by neither pushing forward and also by neither standing still. And when he was further questioned, he said, like when I pushed forward, try to make something happen, try to get enlightened, I got pushed around, swirled around. When I just stood still, I sank. So by neither pushing forward nor standing still did I cross the floods. So it seems a little like, wait a minute, I don't get it. But I think he's really talking about this really relying on discernment. And I mentioned, eventually the discernment, what the mind is discerning is that this way of relating is helpful. This way of relating is skillful. The way the mind is relating right now, comprehending, letting go, that's what leads. And then I want to just read a little bit more from this section of Wings to Awakening. And thank you, Nancy, for putting it into the chat. Implicit in this discussion of the effort involved in mastering skill to the point of its own transcendence is the fact that the goal of the practice is not an effort to return to supposedly pure state of childlike awareness prior to social conditionings. And he goes on and he explains, as much as we might sense in a wild animal or a newborn child, an infant, a kind of state of innocence and just how released. I mean, how many times have I looked at our cat and just lying there, like, that cat doesn't seem to be holding a lot of neurotic tension. But clearly infants and my cat, they can become very tight and contracted. So even though they might be able to sort of access a more relaxed state, they're not out of the woods. They're totally capable of suffering, right? So we really need to manifest the kind of wisdom that keeps the mind from falling back into those tendencies, those latent tendencies. He ends up this chapter writing, "Thus, the way to lies not in renouncing one's developed intellectual powers, but in developing those powers to the higher levels of mastery and skill. This explains why wise exertion is a necessary part of practice," right? The wisdom of effort. It really comes from comprehending. Wanting to be done with efforting, just see where that leads. It just leads to the same old thing. We just end up following habit. So we have to go through this process of learning how to personally make effort that's skillful and how to really rely on what we've learned on this so-called personal level. That's why we sit. And we sit every morning, we get up and we sit, we go on retreats, and given our responsibilities in life, we really use this ritual called sitting still in meditation, holding the body relatively still in a relaxed way and training the mind to be aware of the present moment. It's a huge effort because we're going against the stream of the mind doing whatever it wants to do, worrying about this, planning that, dwelling in the past, imagining the future, fantasizing. And all of a sudden we're saying, no, honey, we're not going to do that. We're going to feel the body sitting. We're going to notice the breath. When we do think, we're going to notice thinking is being known. It's just that. When we start to hate ourselves for having so many habits, oh, hatred, self-hatred is like this. It's just that being known. So we learn that effort to start over again. I don't know much, but I do know that this experience is something being felt, something being known here and now. This is how it is. This is being experienced. It's being felt. So we start over, we know that effort, and then we learn that more subtle effort to sustain present moment awareness, to really build it. Just end with a quote from Sayadaw U Tejaniya. Avoiding difficult situations or running away from them does not usually take much skill or effort, but doing so prevents you from testing your own limits and from growing. The ability to face difficulties can be crucial for your own growth. However, if you are faced with a situation in which the difficulties are simply overwhelming, you should step back for the time being and wait until you've built up enough strength to deal with them skillfully. So we have the effort to sort of turn away from some problem that we don't have the stability to be with. We need to know the effort to sustain with difficult experience when we have enough stability, enough interest, enough wisdom, enough self-compassion. And we need to learn the effort of letting go and just letting the wholesome qualities of mind, which are impersonal, letting them do the work. Let nature do the work. I remember times in practice, neurotically thinking I need to practice. But the mindfulness already had a head of steam. It already had momentum. And eventually that wisdom awareness exposed how off that idea that I need to make effort was, but it was tenacious, because it had been skillful, but was no longer skillful. And to learn to trust is really hard. And I'm guessing that we've learned this in different parts of our life. Even in romantic or marriages, where we trying really hard to be a good partner sometimes is not the way to be a good partner. Or trying neurotically to be a good parent is not really a very effective way to be a parent. It'd be much more useful to be in a more relaxed way, to be real, just to let it rip, so to speak. Let our personality, let our way of being with that person or in that situation, just let it go, let it be. And the stance, so to speak, is, well, this will be interesting. You know, that wisdom awareness, curious. This will be interesting how the personality, how the mind and body does this next moment of life, and then the next, and then the next. So for those who are able to stay, I'm going to give some announcements. So please just stay on for another moment if you would. But the theme today could be just exploring together in this small group moments of effortlessness where you felt like the qualities of mind were quite wholesome. And I believe Nancy is here today to help out. But before I leave, I just want to mention we have a half-day retreat that I'll be leading on the 11th of September. You can sign up for that via the weekly email or to just look at our online calendar. And then this month in September, I'll be leading the Loving Kindness Practice Group, not on the first Friday as I usually do, but on the second Friday, because we'll have our Labor Day retreat this weekend that I'll be leading with Shelley. So that will be on the 10th, Friday the 10th, 7 to 8:30. And then the third Friday is always Self-Compassion with Jean and Jane. And then on the fourth Friday of the month, Stacy McClendon leads the another Loving Kindness Practice Group. And then we'll have a masculinity conversation for those of you who identify as male or masculine out at our retreat center on the 18th. And there's a number of both work retreats and practice periods out at our retreat property in September and October. So check the weekly email or check the calendar, or you could go to the Prairie Farm section of the website, and that will have all those dates and give you more information about that.